When I was 8 years old, I saw a film at the Crest Theater on Westwood Boulevard in Los Angeles, where I grew up, called The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. It's a Ray Harryhausen film. And I went crazy. I mean, people can usually tell you the movie that changed their life. It's often, depending how old you are, Star Wars or, whatever it is. But I really had complete suspension of disbelief. I loved it. And I came home and I asked my mother, who does that? Who makes the movie? How do what? Who makes the movie? And she said, the director makes the movie. And I was, actually, when I think back, it's surprising to me because she was not in the movie business, How did she know the director? Anyway, so from the time I was 8, I wanted to be a director when I grew up. I wanted to make movies. So I had a real goal, and I did everything I could, which is when you're 8, not a lot. But I saw every movie, literally every film that was released. I would go see it, whether it was Grindhouse or Exploitation or Antonioni and Bergman and Fellini. I mean, I saw everybody from Truffaut to Larry Buchanan. I saw everything. And there's a wonderful thing, actually, that's very difficult now, if not impossible because of the internet, is when you go to see a movie and you don't know anything about it, and it can really surprise you. I mean, I saw Hollywood Boulevard in L.A. in the teens and 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s was very fancy and elegant and exciting. And in the 60s, it started going down. And by the 70s, it was really kind of, it was like 42nd Street, New York used to be. So it was tawdry, but it had millions of movie theaters, and they used to show triple features for $1 and stuff. So you see films. I remember there was a film called Mark of the Devil, a German movie that they badly dubbed, and the advertising was when you went to the theater, they gave you a vomit bag. Just in the early 70s sometime, I don't know when it was, but I went to see a triple feature. And I went to see it because I think it was that film Spirits of the Dead. One of the stories was done by Fellini, Toby Dammit, and one was done by Roger Vadim, and the other was done by Louis Malle. Did you ever see this movie? It's not a great movie. There's the Roger Vadim is very weird because Jane Fonda and Peter Fonda play lovers. So it's like, But the one with Alain Delon and Brigitte Bardot is pretty good. But Fellini's is brilliant. It's with Terence Stamp. It's called Never Bet the Devil Your Head. It's very funny, and truly, it ends with the real, it's excellent. Fellini doing horror. It's excellent. Anyway, so I went to go see that, and it was showing with two other, because the horror films, especially from Europe, the Giallos and the German exploitation, all this stuff, they were all kind of dumped together, with Hammer films and Godzilla movies and everything. So I go to see that. I went to see that film. But one of the other two movies that was being shown was a movie I never heard of called Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was Toby's movie. And I'm sitting there, and I'm watching this film, and I go, this is a great film. This is remarkable. I mean, and down to the ending, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And especially that time in the country, it was amazing. So you don't get that kind of exciting discovery doesn't happen anymore. It's also the way I saw Night of the Living Dead. As the third feature on some, with Gorgo or something, I don't know. Because I grew up in Los Angeles in the 50s, 60s, I was born in 1950, so I'm literally the 50s, I'm 10, the 60s, I was the right age. But at that time, many of the great filmmakers, many of the people who invented the language that we still use were alive and well, probably my age, There were guys from one of the most shocking things, the wonderful film by Billy Wilder, Sunset Boulevard?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a brilliant film, very dark, and it's a great film. Well, Norma Desmond, the character played by Norma Shearer, do you know how old she is in the movie, the character? 50. It's like, holy, things change, but that was yikes. Anyway, so these people were still alive. So I was able to go out and meet everybody. I mean, I looked up Alan Dwan in the phone book and called him. Mr. Dwan, may I take you to lunch, So I was able to meet and talk to everybody from Alan Dwan to King Vidor, you named them, Howard Hawks, George Cukor, everybody. So, and later I was very lucky when I was at Universal, this is much later, but Alfred Hitchcock loved the Blues Brothers and invited me to lunch. So I used to go have lunch with Mr. Hitchcock for about a year and almost 2 years, every Thursday. And that was wonderful. So I've been very lucky. I mean, I've met most of my heroes. Fellini, you're not supposed to meet your heroes because they're often disappointing people. But Federico Fellini was everything you wanted him to be. He was warm and funny and brilliant. He was great. Anyway, so this long, boring story is I'm trying to do everything I can because when I grow up, I'll be a director. So I'm trying to get any job I can get in a movie, any job. When I was 16, turning 17, I was 16 really, I was legally able to leave school. So I left. I'm a bad example. I'm a high school dropout. And I got a job in the mailroom of 20th Century Fox Studios. And I loved it because there was lots of production. I got to meet George Stevens and Robert Altman. They were shooting MASH when I was there. They were finishing Hello, Dolly. They were doing Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And I became great friends with John Chambers, who did the makeups. And it was great. It was like I was a pig in shit, it's called. I was just in heaven. And I did that for about a year. And then I got a job. I was offered a job on the second unit of a movie called Catch-22. A man named Andrew Marton, Bundy Marton, who was a wonderful Hungarian-American director he directed many movies. King Solomon's Mines, with Stuart Granger. He directed so many movies, but the one, he started at Ufa and Silence, but the one that... the most famous one is he became a second unit director, action director. It's kind of a curse, really, but he directed The Chariot Race in the first Ben-Hur. Not the first, the second Ben-Hur, the one with Charlton Heston, William Wyler. So he said, I'll give you a job on the second unit. And I went down to Mexico to a place called Guaymas, San Carlos Baja. Beautiful. And Paramount built a landing strip. Have you ever seen Catch-22?
Yes, it's
Mike Nichols.
Yes.
It's actually a good movie, and do you remember all the B-25s, all the airplanes? Well, they had about 18 of them, all these World War II planes, and they were held together with gaffer tape and rubber bands. And Bundy directed all the flying. There's amazing flying in it, and it was Paul Mantz and Frank Tallman. Anyway, so I did that for 3 weeks, and I hated it. Because down there, I'm in an airplane, and down there was Orson Welles and, Alan Arkin and John Voight and Marty Ball. I mean, all these great actors are down there with Mike Nichols, and I'm up in the air in the B-25 going, Bandero es roja. I hated it. So I quit, because it wasn't close enough to real filmmaking. It was... And I went back to the mailroom for about 4 months, and then Bundy called me and he said, listen, the Bundy's Andrew Marton, and he said, maybe I can get you a job on this movie called The Warriors, which was released as Kelly's Heroes. It was an MGM movie with Clint Eastwood, Telly Savalas, Don Sutherland, big World War II movie. And that's a movie that I started out as a gopher, and because the production was so screwed up, I got higher and higher. And it was a great experience, probably the best time of my life, because I had all the pleasure of filmmaking on a big scale, and none of the responsibility. Wasn't my movie. But I made friends for life. Don Sutherland, Don Rickles, the director Brian Hutton, who just passed away. Clint. People who I still know, a lot of them, the ones who are living. When that was finished, I heard there was a lot of production in Spain. Franco, like all good fascists, understood film. So Franco allowed other film companies to come to make movies in Spain, and it was very cheap at that time. So everybody was making movies there, and it was called the spaghetti boom, because they were making so many Italian westerns and German westerns and American westerns and British movies. I worked. Anyway, a friend, Jim O'Rourke, and I drove to Almeria. I'm getting the schlock. We drove to Almeria to get any jobs we could. And I ended up on the first film, which I'll remember the title. But Jim and I met the British production manager, and he said, "Do you do horse falls?" And Jim said, "Oh, absolutely, yes. Been on a horse my whole life, yes." And I'm thinking, what the fuck, horse falls? And the next day, it was Sergeant Light Brigade. I'm dressed as a hussar, and I'm like, ah! And they told us, when you get to this point, dive off the horse, and there's an explosion there. It's a movie explosion. They have the kind where you see like that, and big chunks and smoke. The chunks are cork, and it's just smoke. Those are not dangerous if you're not on top of them. And my first stunt, I had no idea what I was. I was just riding very fast, and when they shot a gun, I dove off the horse. I thought I was going to die, and I lay dead there for a while. And then we hear cut, and I think, am I breathing? I was fine. I was in Spain a little over 2 years. During that time, I went to Paris and a couple of movies, and then there's a French stunt driver named Romain Julien, and there was an English movie called The Italian Job. And then I was with some British stunt guys, and they said, "Do you want to go to Rome?" "Yes, please." If you ever see The Italian Job, I'm one of the many people jumping out of the way of the Mini Coopers as they go down the Spanish Steps and all that. So that was my first time in Rome. It was pretty great. Anyway, I worked, and then Brian Hutton, who was the director of Kelly's Heroes, was going to make a film in London. In any case, he said, John, he contacted me in space. He said, "Would you like to be my assistant director?" And yes. So I had to go back to Los Angeles for the first time in 2 years. I had to legally do it in the UK, I had to be a member of the Directors Guild of America, the union. So I fly back to LA. So now I'm 21. I just turned 21. And I go to the DGA, and they say, well, you can take the test. They had started this apprenticeship program where you took a test, and if you did well on the test, then you became what's called a third AD, and you do that for a long time, and then a second AD, you do that for a long time, and hopefully you become a first. So I said, but I'm being offered the job of a first, and so it was a long thing, and finally they said, okay, if you do well on this test, we'll give you a provisional membership, and it was like something like $4,000. It was like, whoa, it was a lot. And anyway, I took this test, and with hundreds of other people. It was a stupid test. It was like really easy. But I'd worked on like 60 movies already. So I took the test, and I got the highest score. So I think, great, I'm going to London. I'll be at Shepperton, bye, But instead, I'm called into, at that time, the president of the guild was Robert Aldrich, who was a wonderful director, you know, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and The Dirty Dozen, and made many, many, many good movies. And he was scary. He had his eyebrows were like, they were like Mephistopheles. But he was nice, big man. And he goes in and he goes, Mr. Landis, you know, and I'm 21, I have hair to here, you know. He said, do you know Mr. Leroy? And Mervyn Leroy was sitting on the couch. He was old, but do you know who Mervyn Leroy was? He directed Little Caesar with Edward G. Robinson. He's the producer of The Wizard of Oz. And so, old-time Hollywood figure. He made a lot of movies. So I'm like, wow. And they were very nice, but they had to explain to me, because I didn't have a college diploma, because I didn't have a BA, what it's called, I didn't have a high school diploma. I was not eligible to take the test. I said, but I took the test, and I got the highest score. We know, and we're very sorry, but the rules are you have to have a BA, you have to be college graduate. So I was so mad. I was like, fuck them. I was so angry as only a 21-year-old can be, you know, really furious. And that night, I went to Hollywood Boulevard with my friend Jim O'Rourke to see, it's my lawyer, to see some bad movies. Let's see bad movies. And one of the movies was called Trog. It was Joan Crawford's last movie. It was ridiculous. It was it's the kind of bad that's very funny. And I'm watching this movie going, Jesus Christ, you know. And I said to Jim O'Rourke, I said, fuck them, you know, my whole plan was one day I'd be a director when I grew up. And I realized this is a good question, what makes you a film director?
Bad movies?
No. Someone gives you the money. It means that you've made a film. That's all. There's no right or wrong way. Like if you want to be a doctor or a pilot, or then they're architect, there's all these, you do this, you do this, you do this, and they give you a piece of paper and you're a doctor. To be a filmmaker, all you need is to make a film.